Hello everyone, welcome to Moneycontrol CEO panel discussion on what should be at the top of the agenda for the new government. The new government, as we know, would come by end of May, and what should it do to push economic reforms, create opportunities for jobs, and also push for growth? To discuss this and more, we have with us Mr. R. Ramakrishnan, CEO of Polycab, who just had a bumper listing in the market. Mr. Sachin Angaonkar, CEO of Specialty Business at RPG Group, whose business spans from plantation to power sector and life sciences. Thank you, gentlemen, for coming today with us.
Our pleasure being here.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I would like to start with a very simple question. Now, a stable government or a hung government, I mean, as a chief executive, what does that mean for you? When you look at a financial year, does anything alter for you when it's a stable or if it is not a stable government?
I think it's all about a feel-good factor. One doesn't like uncertainty. One doesn't like parliamentary horse trading. One doesn't like a situation where there is uncertainty in terms of economic policy or the path of policy reforms. So, a stable government very often sends a strong signal that when it comes to economic policy, when it comes to security policy, when it comes to monetary policy, one can expect a certain degree of continuity. Otherwise, there is an element of uncertainty.
That's right. Mr. Nangaonkar.
I think I would also kind of tend to agree. In corporates, we make decisions which have a bearing in terms of how they will pan out over a few years. And hung government gives us a sense that, look, we need to be careful with investment decisions which have a long-term impact. And we tend to go slow on those decisions. For us as corporates, a stable government, a consistent policy just makes the job of making the right investment decisions that much more easier.
Fantastic. So when the manufacturing numbers came in last, there was some slight of a fear of a slowdown. Now, what would be the biggest priority for you, and if you are given a chance to advise the new government, what would be there at the top of your priority list?
I'm going to speak about something that I'm very passionate about.
Sure.
I think I'm going to say something very radical. Today, the fact of the matter is, whoever is a new government, there are going to be certain states that belong to a particular political formation and certain states that are belonging to another political formation with a large number of regional formations. Whoever comes to power at the center, I would urge strongly that there is a need for a common economic program which is across centers and states. What do I mean by that? There are some things that are good for the center and good for the state. That can be the genesis for this common minimum program. Job creation, agriculture sector, what needs to be done to improve the lot of the farmers, infrastructure creation, urban renewal and ease of manufacturing, both in terms of job creation as also in terms of automation that will be a spur to manufacturing progress. I think if these 4 or 5 areas are taken up, apart from some areas of social sector reforms that I will speak a little later about, I think we can have greater center and state cooperation, and I think that is critical for tomorrow's India.
So these are very important points. You talked about job creation. Now, coming from a manufacturing company, what do you think could be done? What is the issue here? Is it the lack of talent?
See, let's be very clear. India is throwing up enormous number of engineers, enormous number of graduates. The number is very huge, but there is a lot of underemployment. There are significant skill gaps in terms of what corporate India needs versus what the quality of skilling is available. The second important thing is, how do we promote greater entrepreneurship? How do we make people more independent in terms of searching for their source of income? You see, the digital transformation of India, what's happened in terms of data in the hands of people is a phenomenal equalizer. That itself will throw up tremendous opportunities for entrepreneurship. But are we training people on that? Are we encouraging people to be businessmen? I think these are the questions that I have in my mind.
So Skill India would be a major, should be a major focus here.
I think so, because education, skilling leads to employability and will lead to employment generation. I think that is the link.
Mr. Nandgaonkar, RPG specialty business, now you cover the gamut of, say, the plantation, which is agriculture, your power, through the power sector, you are also in the semi-urban, rural areas, and the life sciences, the pharmaceutical, another important area. So from your perspective, what should be the priority for the government?
So I'll kind of describe it the way as CEOs we think about it. So if I look at my everyday job is to think about this year, next 5 years, and also build a strong company for a 20, 25, 30, 50 year time frame. The actions are a mix of all of that. Yeah. I have to do actions which will deliver me this year's figures. I have to take actions which are important from a 5-year perspective, and I have to take actions which will make my company still be a strong company many years down the line. Now, for me, putting up something very simple as a thought, we all as Indians have been talking about India as the fastest growing economy, one of the largest economy in the world. But is that not given? If we are 18% of the world's population, we would be one of the largest economies in the world. To me, the dialogue has to move from being the largest economy of the world to the most rapidly developing economy on a whole lot of other parameters than just the economic growth. To me, the underlying parameters of growth, which are health, infrastructure, education, ease of doing business, quality of jobs, those have to also be part of it. Coming back to what then you asked, for example, I'll give you an example of my plantations business. The plantation business is still governed by the 1962 Act. The 1962 Act allows us to use the plantation land in a certain manner, defined as 6 crops that can actually be grown there. Okay. Now, if I look at 1962 versus 2018, what was relevant in 1962 is no longer relevant in 2018. Okay. The entire industry is making losses. I honestly see a risk of green cover going away, lots of jobs going out, lots of companies going away, and somebody has to handle an issue saying, look, what is the relevant act under which this land should be governed so that this industry is a viable, thriving industry in a 2030, 2040 time frame. Same I would ask from a pharma point of view. Yes, we are now the world's largest generic manufacturer. But why do we find that the increase in R&D investments in China is so much more than an increase in R&D investments in India? If we are the largest generic manufacturer in the world, why can't we also be the largest new product developer in the world? A lot of those questions, to my mind, are important to take in view as the new government comes up. Yes, growth, jobs will be important from a short-term point of view, but I think whichever government comes up, my request, my urge, my hope would be people take a longer view and a more holistic view.
One thing you talked about is ease of doing business, and as chief executives, both of you would be very concerned about that. I'd like to have view on both of you. What should improve in the way of ease of doing business?
I think it all boils down to whether the policy is being implemented in spirit or in letter. Unfortunately, the letter takes a lot more precedence over the spirit, and that results in bottlenecks. That also results in a little abuse of the system. That also results in some sort of a speed money and things of that nature. That's one. Two, how is it that you encourage entrepreneurship? How easy is it to get to do business across India as one common market? How easy is it for you to get capital? How easy is it to be able to offer your services? I think I would say there is a lot of improvement and there is a lot of progress with digitalization. But I'll tell you, for example, in terms of land, that's one major problem areas in terms of land records and in terms of everything else relating to. So there are multiple things that come into it in terms of ease of doing business.
Fantastic. What about you, Mr. Nandgaonkar? You talked
I
about
would just add a few more things. Just, I think, consistent policy, consistent framework, and being able to enforce contracts. If you look at in the last 5 years, I think we've made a lot of progress on ease of doing business. Sure. But I think the 2-3 places where there is still a large gap is starting a new business, being able to close down a factory which is no more viable, being able to enforce contracts, both supplier contracts, customer contracts. People still kind of worry about a lot of those things. Those have to change in a big way. For people to invest in this country, not just because we are 18% of the population, but because it makes sense to invest in this country.
That's right. So people, I mean, you talked about the social reform that one needs. Where do you think we are missing the link? What do you think which we should do?
Let me just take a few parameters. Sure. And life expectancy at birth. Today 69.1 years. Country comparison, we stand at 163 in the world. Health expenditure, today we are at 4.7% of GDP, maybe a little more than that. We have 10 of the world's 20 most polluted cities. Gender equality, we are 130 in the world, even neighboring Bhutan is 97. I'm just throwing up some of these just to indicate the quantum of effort needed. You see, nobody can transform India in the short run. But if you're very clear that these are the indicators that we want to impact, I think the impact has to start from the social side for it to impact the people side and for it to impact the economic side. You try and attack economics without, addressing the core social issues, your effort will become that much more difficult.
Actually, it's very refreshing to see a chief executive talking so much about social reforms and not just about economic reforms. How, like, you completely interlink the two, which is actually the true picture. Mr. Nandgaonkar, what do you think about the social reform? What are the two main areas that we need to improve on?
So, you take a long-term view about some of these things. And we as businesses won't survive and do well in the long run unless some of these socio-ecoms happen simultaneously. Yeah. Unless we find the quality of people who come into the jobs is good, it helps us improve the productivity level the right way. And a lot of that is linked to the social reforms. It's about education, it's about skilling, it's about health. And unless that engine moves the right way, short term we can be fine, we can do a lot of things to kind of tide the bottlenecks. But the long runs, unless the social reforms happen in parallel, and it is not just the job of governments to support that, but it's also us as corporates who have to kind of understand and move this needle on this a lot forward.
The rural-urban market divide, something that I would like to discuss. How big is that non-metro market for you in Polycab, and how do you see the demand there? What could be done to improve consumption and investment in non-urban areas?
I'm under some non-disclosure period at this point in time, so I would not like to specifically comment. But if I make a total observation for industry, it's very clear that whether it be construction, whether it be consumption in non-metro markets is still strong. In terms of consumption also, the non-metro demand, non-urban demand is something that is really driving a lot of things in the economy. Having said that, I want to dwell upon this in the context of the priority of the new government that you had asked about. That's right. I would say urbanization is an important priority. What do I mean by that? Being able to provide urban quality of life in semi-urban and rural India. Whether it be what impacts the social fabric of the life there, or it be in terms of the rising aspirations of the people there. Ultimately, what is the objective? The objective is to create jobs. And when you create jobs, you drive rural consumption because that money goes into consumption.
Fantastic. Mr. Nangaonkar, one of your businesses which has exposure to the power sector, so which is also the infrastructure, and that's a big point, especially if you see the non-urban areas. What do you think should be done to really prop up infrastructure? Because that is also connected to ease of doing business.
Yeah. So I think let's kind of look at infrastructure in 2-3 different ways. There is the connectivity part, yeah, which is the road infrastructure. There is the electricity part, which is ensuring that kind of electricity is there. There is the water part, yeah. There is the health part, yeah. There is the education part. To me, kind of being clear of what is the role of the government and the private sector and remaining consistent on that philosophy and that framework for a long period of time is the way to take it forward. As corporates, are we interested in capturing a pie of that investment as it will happen? Of course we are. At times, why do we feel uncomfortable with it? The questions are not about it not the market or the opportunity not being there. These investments are typically long term, and for us there are at times a question about, look, is the policy framework, is the underlying assumptions are going to remain consistent over for a long period of time for us to take a leap in terms of some of those areas where the fungibility in terms of moving your resources is limited. So for me, and as corporates, we would absolutely love to participate in building infrastructure if the government finds a right, balanced, consistent framework in participating.
One of the areas, again, the reforms, the economic reform. The last 5 years, we saw the insolvency reforms. We saw GST being implemented. Now, going the next 5 years, what do you think should be at the top of the agenda when it comes to economic reforms?
If I were to say, when it comes to macroeconomic reforms, it would be areas like controlling the current account deficit. The most important part is finding the balance between growth and inflation. Increase in tax revenues by broadening the tax base, efforts are going on. There is a greater formalization of the economy. I think that is good. I think debt management, maybe there is a need for setting up a separate debt management office.
Sure. How about the tax structure? As a chief executive, I think that will be, especially the corporate tax. Do you see anything, hope to see something happening there?
You see, I think a more moderate level of corporate tax will result in far greater disclosure of income, and thereby it will boost revenues. I have seen that happening on excise duty. I have seen that happening on VAT, and I have seen that happening on GST. And the same is true in terms of direct tax.
Fantastic. Mr. Nangaonkar, would corporate tax be there up in your list also when it comes to changes?
I think the issue is not just about rate reduction to me. The issue is also about transparency. The issue is about widening the base. Issue is about using digital mechanisms to be able to bring everybody into the net. And as everybody is brought into the net, the right level needs to be found, which makes corporates and individuals feel comfortable in disclosing and complying, as against continuously trying to find ways of saving some bucks here and there.
One last question about ease of the liquidity in the system, or ease of credit or funds. How do you see the system now? Do you see it improving in the next few years?
If I were to say the interest rate regime, if India has to grow, the interest rates cannot be at the current levels. While someone might say the real interest rate is still reasonable if you have inflation of 5% and 8.5–9% is the interest rate, so the real interest rate is, I'm not a buyer of that. There has to be a mechanism by which we reduce the cost of doing business in terms of the cost of borrowings. I think it's extremely important. Even a marginal reduction in terms of, let us say, interest rates on housing, interest rates on personal expenditure, and also in terms of corporate borrowing rates, will be a tremendous spur for capital formation to happen again and for personal consumption, such as housing or upgradation of housing or buying of higher value economic needs, automobiles, etc., two-wheelers. I think all that will get spurred. I think it's a key.
Interesting. And Mr. Nandgaonkar, how about the reforms driving the rural consumption? How much do you think that's going to be important?
So, see, where does consumption come from? At the end of the day, consumption comes from when people have some surplus income or they have income to be able to spend. A large part of the rural income still is agricultural based or trading based or repatriations of money from people living in cities back to, that's really where the money gets into rural. The rural consumption has been robust, has been actually more resilient than actually the urban consumption. But a large part of the population in the country is still living in rural. While yes, they are moving, more and more people are moving to urban centers, there is still a large number that's remaining there. Now, if the consumption growth has to remain strong there, agricultural reforms are important. People have to go back to seeing money it's possible to make money in agriculture.
I would like to add a comment here. I think the most important challenge in front of India is how do you double farm incomes? There are two aspects to it. One is improvements in farming techniques, and the other aspect is how do you get a fairer value realization for the farm produce. Let's be clear, that sector is so critical and so important, but all our farmers are marginal farmers. I mean, today, how does a farmer who's having a very small plot of land and maybe he and his three brothers are dependent upon it, how does he get better seeds? How does he get better pesticides? How does he get the technology and knowledge? How does he do farming? How does he get hold of a tractor or a harvester? How does he improve his productivity? I would say there has to be a tremendous initiative in terms of improving the farm sector at the marginal farmer level, probably examine ways and means of a group farming or a cooperative farming, provide them a better set of seeds so that entire area, horticulture, floriculture, developing certain fruit farming or whatever is needed happens. Sure. I would also like to say, with the APMC being dismantled, farmers' price realization is at the mercy of intermediaries. What can we do to create the appropriate way by which farm to the table, where the farmer gets a substantial portion of the value chain rather than maybe just getting 5 to 7% of the value chain and someone is taking away 93% from what should go to into his pocket. I think these are challenges, and tomorrow's India depends on how well we are able to address this. We should not forget that 50% of India is still a farming India.
That's right. On that note, thank you gentlemen for joining us. It has been great hosting you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much.
A blueprint for rural growth, ease of doing business and better reforms is one the CEOs of India Inc. would want the new government to focus on. For more news and views, please log on to moneycontrol.com. Thank you.